Welcome. Howdy. Hopefully you didn't party too much last night. That music there was from Ozo Motley. The Pluralsight guys had these guys at their party. So if you weren't there, you missed out. They were rocking. Anyway, so welcome. Today we're going to talk about JEA, the Just Enough Administration Toolkit. So this is a PowerShell toolkit to manage what we call the post-Snowden world. And we'll explain what that means. I'm Jeffrey Snover. I'm a distinguished engineer, and I'm the lead architect for Windows Server and the System Center Data Center products. And today I'm lucky enough to have...
I'm John Slack. I'm a program manager on the PowerShell team and been working on JEA for the past several months.
Now, just before the talk, John confided with me, he said, previously, the largest talk I ever gave was to like half of one of these rows. So you got to be very nice to John today. We've got lots of demos. If something screws up, just give him encouragement. That's for me, too. All right. Okay, so let's start with the context, this post-Snowden world. Anybody know this guy? This guy's Michael Hayden. Michael Hayden. Okay, Michael Hayden is 4-star general, director of the NSA, director of the CIA, and director of national intelligence. Pretty guy with a lot of important stuff. Now, when I first gave this talk, I would ask the question, is anybody in this room is anybody in this room smarter than this guy? Well, it turns out the first time I gave the talk was to a group of Microsoft technical fellows, and they all raised their hands. So that was not the reaction I was going for. So the real question is not, are you smarter than this guy? This guy's a very smart guy, and you might be smarter. But the question is, does anybody have assets more important to protect than this guy? And I would be very surprised if anybody raised their hand, in all honesty. And then the second question is, does anybody have a budget higher than this guy to protect those assets? And I guarantee no one's going to raise their hand. Okay? So that's the first character in our conversation. Now let's introduce the second character in our conversation. Edward Snowden. Edward Snowden. Edward Snowden, 30-year-old college dropout. Okay, gentlemen, 2-year quarters. Game on. Who's going to win? Now, the point of this is that Michael Hayden made a decision that each of us make every single day. It was a decision that we can't not make. We just would be unfunctional, dysfunctional unless we made it. And yet it was a decision that was by far the worst mistake he ever made in his life. And if he could do anything in his life over again, he would undo this one decision. And that was... he made this guy an admin on his systems, right? And that was a disaster, right? Because, right? Because we all know. By the way, how many of you are admins? Okay, look around you. There are the kings of the kingdom. You know, you guys have it all, okay? Now so much. Now, in a note of just irony poisoning, one of the documents that Edward Snowden linked was an NSA document literally named "I hunt and hack system admins." That's right, let's be really clear about this. The NSA is hunting and hacking you. Like you and you and you. Like not theoretically, actually. And it's not because you look a little bit dodgy, but, you don't. You look like a pretty good guy. It's not that you're a bad guy. It's just that you have the keys to the kingdom. So why would I go through all this hard work to try and hack the system, especially, the Windows, which is getting better and better and better in security? Like, why go through all that pain and headache to try and hack that system when all I need to do is to hack you? Because if I hack you, you have all the keys to the kingdom, and I can come on as an authorized user and get everything that I want. Okay? So indeed, this real thing, who better to target than the person that already has the keys to the kingdom?
All right, so what's the big takeaway here? It's that admins are an attack surface. And this doesn't just, one way this shows up is insider attacks, a la Edward Snowden. 19%
By the way,
of
that says EX Snowden. That's for example, not execute. Maybe, probably should have used EG.
Yeah, that would have been a good thing to do.
Missed that in the edit pass.
So according to the Verizon Data Breach Report from 2014, 19% of data breaches are classified as insider abuse. Snowden is one example of this, but if you just think about a malicious insider both within your organization or if you're using some third-party hoster within their organization, whatever power they are given, they can use maliciously. They have the keys to the kingdom. Stolen credentials is another really important way that this shows up. So you don't have to, you might think to yourself, oh, I'm a trustworthy guy, my coworkers are trustworthy guys, we're in good shape. But if your credentials get stolen, the use of stolen credentials was actually the top threat action according to the Verizon database breach report.
Yeah, and by the way, we should make it really clear, you know, like Snowden, hate Snowden, we're not taking a position on that issue. But one way or the other, I think everyone would agree, he did something that the employers didn't want to have happen. And that's really what this talk is about.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, if I can say one thing, it's that you cannot protect yourself against your users doing things that they are allowed to do, right? You can't protect yourself from those credentials getting stolen and being used in legitimate ways. And this is a problem.
You used to not be able to.
Yeah, this is true. And this is a problem because most administration is binary. There are islands of role-based access control in Windows. Typically, they are specific to one application. They're coarse-grained, and their roles don't extend beyond the application. So you end up with this patchwork of systems that there's no...
By the way, when we say administration is binary, really what we're saying is you're admin or you're not admin. And if you're admin, you can do everything, right? And so indeed, there are the islands where that's not the case. There's islands of these rollbacks, but by and large, most administration is binary.
Absolutely. So I think we're ready to go to...
Yeah, and the point there was, in the past, these islands, those are all great. You know, this guy has an island, that guy has an island. To agree to which we're doing stuff in that context, I can have this role-based authentication. But as a platform, as an operating system, and really this whole issue of binary administration is a design flaw set into operating systems, you know, 40 years ago. And it was just a mindset that we had that needs to be updated. So what we need is an operating system level abstraction to address this so that we can change the entire ecosystem so that it's a universal thing.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now we're going to demo stolen credentials, yes?
Yes, we're going to.
Okay, now, a lot of people think of, you know, they see these movies, right? Like, oh, you know, if I could just overclock the Unix Django, I can do a basic DDoS, you know, blah, 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 blah. And in reality, it's like, hi, I'm Robert from the county password inspectors. You know, can you help me? I mean, this is really it, right? Or if it's not this, right? So here's another great one from XYYD.
XKCD.
Oh, there you go. Got that dyslexia thing going on, right? So the passwords, you know, the laptop's encrypted. Let's build $1 million cluster to crack it. And it's like, oh no, it's 4,000 4K RSA bit, and it's like, no, let's just use a wrench and get the password out of them, okay? So this is, you know, the point I'm trying to make here is that it's not, look, some of these nation states have infinite budgets to be able to crack your systems, right? And so you might be thinking, well, I just have to, you know, if with an infinite budget, there's really no way to protect myself, but that's not really the issue. There are very simple ways that admins give up their credentials all the time, okay? So let's give an example. Okay, so here I'm going to log into the system. Hey, John, I was going to do the demo here, but I don't have the password.
I wrote it on a sticky note and left it on my laptop.
Password on a sticky note. Well, let's see here. Don't screw up. Bang. Oh, but it's secure because the E in screw was a 3, so now it's secure. Okay, so that's good. Now, by the way, you might be thinking, what idiot would ever put a password on a sticky note, right? Anybody think that? No. Now, really, just to drive this point home, did anybody pick up on this thing about what they claimed it was ISIS had taken down this French media company, right? They took them down. They were saying all sorts of things on their station and all this. And it's like, oh, this terrible cyber attack. Oh, Lord, the bad guys have really taken it to another level of sophistication. What now must we do about this terrible evil? And then they found out the way that the guys got in was they were interviewing some reporter, and he's standing there at his desk, and right behind him is a big thing with the admin password printed out on his workstation. I'm not making this up. And he's on television with the password right there. It's like, hey. So this stuff happens all the time.
Yeah.
Now, all it takes is one leak in the dam, right? One leak in the dam that then grows and grows and grows and grows. And so if you're not familiar how the way they do this is, all they need to do is to get on one system, and then there are tools like Mimikatz. Now, Mimikatz is a tool, and what it does is it'll go and harvest all the credentials on the machine. Anyone that's logged on to this machine. So if it turns out that, okay, so I've hacked this machine and I can harvest all the credentials of anyone that's logged on it. Now, if someone hasn't logged on that's important, what I'll do is I'll cause some mischief, and so that the person then says, oh, help desk, could you please log on? And the help desk, Lord knows all the admin privs we give those guys, then they log on to your machine, and then you use Mimikatz and you can harvest the credentials. And what you'll see here is you can get the username, you can get their NTLM hash and use that for a pass the hash password. Sometimes you can get the clear text passwords. I mean, truly scary stuff. And so what happens is they get one machine and then they spider their way through the network. They use those credentials to get to another machine and then another machine and get more and more credentials, and they're keeping big Excel spreadsheets of all the credentials and all the machines that they have hacked, and it goes south from there.
Exactly.
So again, the key thing I want to take away there is this is not about ultra secure, ultra sophisticated people attacking you. This is about kind of grunt level people. Just need to find one link, one weak link. And this tool, Mimikatz, you can all get that. I mean, you just download it and use it. It's no special NSA, spyware tool. This is on the internet. Everyone can get it, use it.
And actually, if you think about Snowden, how he got access to more documents was actually asking his coworkers for their passwords. And supposedly he got...
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he got like 8 to 10 additional credentials that he used. And he was basically just saying, oh, I need your password to do something on this system. I'm not an admin. And there you go. So we've really described a big problem that I think affects a ton of organizations. It affects you guys, it affects us, it affects everyone. So what would our ideal world look like? How would we deal with this problem? And so let's play the wouldn't it be great if game. Wouldn't it be great if we could reduce the number of full administrators in your environment? The fewer full administrators there are, the less risk that one of those accounts gets hacked, that the fewer people there are, the less sticky note passwords are meaningful for full admins. Next, wouldn't it be great if we could limit movement of those full administrator accounts? So what Jeffrey was talking about, that spidering out across the network, if the administrator account is only useful on one machine and can't be used to access other machines, then you've substantially limited the spidering action that can occur. 3, wouldn't it be great if you could granularly control admin actions? Think about the help desk guys, you think about tier 1 support. These guys really only need to do a certain subset of actions, and you know exactly what those actions are. I want you doing these 10 things. If they don't work, escalate it up. For the love of God, don't try an experiment. So wouldn't it be great if we could granularly control what administrators can do? And then finally, wouldn't it be great if we could log all admin actions in a consistent way? So even after one of these accounts is compromised, or even after you've got an intruder in your environment, it's really important to figure out what they were doing, how it occurred, where are they, how did they spread out through your network so you can stop it if it happens again. Those 4 things are literally what Just Enough Administration is designed to do. Just Enough Administration is role-based administration for Windows. It occurs through PowerShell remoting. So anything PowerShell can do, you can control with just enough administration. Operators do not have a full administrator account when using just enough administration. Instead, they run as an administrator account. But they can only run as an administrator account on certain machines to do specific actions. And you can actually control these actions in a very granular way. And just one thing to note, JEA isn't actually something new. These security techniques that we're using with JEA have actually been around since PowerShell 2. What we're doing is we're making them easy to consume. In the past, in order to use constrained run spaces and all of these other technologies, you had to be an expert in PowerShell. You had to understand them through and through. There was a lot of legwork. JEA makes it really simple to adopt. And it's really simple for your users to use, which takes us to our next demo. Can you switch us to 8?
Yep. Which one? Which number?
8.
8. Melt. Multi.
So let's see. Here we go. All right. So if you guys can see my screen, you'll see on the left I have a red prompt, and on the right I have a blue prompt. And let me just open up these 2 sessions. Now the red prompt is bad. In the red prompt, I am acting as a full administrator. And I'm remoting into another machine, the one Jeffrey actually showed earlier. And if I run git command over here, you will see that there are tons and tons of things I can do on this machine. I can read sensitive files, I can update drivers, I can do anything that PowerShell lets me do. And because PowerShell is so powerful, so flexible, I can do almost anything on the machine.
Yeah, and if there's not a commandlet, you can use PowerShell to write a script. That script can run in memory, and in the past, they'd never touched the disk. So the bad guys like that.
Now on the right, you'll see I'm going to run git command, and I am in a JEA window here. And this list is substantially shorter. In fact, if you start looking at the commands on this list, it's stuff like format list, format table, where object, get alias, get command, right? There's not a lot you can do with these commands,
Yeah,
except
in particular, most of those commands are the commands there are safe commands that are needed for having a good interactive experience. The actual management commands are what? Get process, get counter, get service.
Stop process. Yep. So I know what some of you guys are thinking. You're thinking, the people who I want to take full administrator away from are not experts in PowerShell. I do not want them seeing that prompt. That'll scare them. It scares me. So we understand.
Oh, but wait, we should explain. So these now are the only commands that they can do. If you try and say, read some event log, no. It's that one of the commands, no. Oh, what about, well, it's PowerShell, right? So I can, where are you? It's PowerShell, so I can do crazy stuff, like I can write programs. 2 plus 2. And it says, no. We're in a constrained language mode so that you can't even write a program. You can't do language expressions. You can only run those commands.
Absolutely. So, like I was saying, lots of people have an aversion to showing the PowerShell prompt to their users. So what I have here on the right is the ISE show command add-on. This comes in the box. It's come in the box for years and years and years, and it works against JEA endpoints.
This is new. In the past, show command would only work against local machines. Now when you connect to a remote machine, show command will work against that remote machine. And look, it just has a very small set of commands. That's because it's only showing you the commands that you can do.
And you can filter by modules, so we'll see that in the maintenance toolkit, these are all of the commands that I exposed. So I can click git service, run, and it'll run git service on the left-hand side.
Right, so that gives you a graphical display for filling out the parameters to run a command. So we find that most people are able to get their head around that. You know, honestly, what we found was, as we talked to people, is often like, well, you know, I'm pretty comfortable with PowerShell. I could do that, but that guy over there, not so much. That's never going to work.
Absolutely. But this still kind of feels like PowerShell. Like it's got verb-noun, you got to enter in the parameters. Some people are like, no, we just want our operators to have 4 buttons. And when they push one of those buttons, it does all the stuff I want it to do, but they don't even need to know what's going on underneath the button. And so I have here a super simple GUI. This super simple GUI has 4 buttons. You push each of the 4 buttons, it'll restart IAS. This is a little bit small. Restart computer, get processor load, or stop notepad. And if you click this button, it's actually written in Sapiens PowerShell Studio. I made this GUI in literally 20 minutes. It uses PowerShell as the underlying API, makes a remote call into the machine that I'm managing. And,
but just to be clear, it's 20 minutes starting off with Sapien. If you had to do it the second time.
Oh, if I had to do it the second time, it would take me 2 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a very nice environment. Now here's the deal. If the 4 commands were the same for you and for you and for you and for you, we'd write the 4 command GUI, right? But the issue is that each of you are going to say, okay, well, Joe needs to do these things. Carl needs to do these things. Mary needs to do these things, and they're all different. So what we're talking about here is the ability for you or your advanced scripters to be able to craft using PowerShell. There's a number of GUI toolkits. Sapien Technologies has a wonderful toolkit called, I believe, Script Studio?
PowerShell Studio.
PowerShell Studio, and it's a graphical environment. You go and you say, here's what I want the GUI to look like, and when they press this button, run this. And so it allows your advanced scripters to produce GUIs for the rest of their teams.
Absolutely. All right, so that was our using JEA demo.
Okay.
So let's switch back.
All right, so let's talk about JEA. So this was introduced a year ago as an experimental toolkit that I had written. It was very, it was one of those things where it's like, I'm pretty sure there's something important here. Let me go experiment and use that as a vehicle to start getting feedback from customers. Well, the response was overwhelmingly positive, And so now we have a formal project around that. We're going to take that and deliver it in Windows Server 2016. And we've been using the customer feedback to drive improvements. So a number of changes will be made, but it's going to ship.
Yep, exactly. One thing to note is we've actually been doing several customer visits with various customers, and we are still looking for preview customers. So if you want to give feedback on what you've seen today, feel free to reach out to us. My email will be at the end of the talk.
Okay, so when it comes to authoring, we really have 2 simple concepts, right? Part of the issue here is that security that doesn't get deployed doesn't yield any benefit. And a lot of times you hear these wonderful things like, oh, this is going to be super secure, and then you drill into the details and you're like, yeah, no, that's not going to work. It's like too complex, or the operational overhead, or, oh, it starts out good, like it will start, and then it's just like, yeah, it's just such a pain in the butt, we're not going to do it. So we're very focused in on making it so that you can take these concepts and deploy them in a very simple way that's very easy to operate. So in this environment, we have 2 concepts, 2, right? One is the JEA Toolkit. Now, this JEA Toolkit is this well-defined set of commands that you want somebody to do. Instead of everything, and think about JEA Toolkit like, oh yeah, those guys, they maintain the drivers on the systems, so they're going to need to be able to update drivers and to reboot the machine. Well, these people do software maintenance on the machine, so they need to be able to do inventory information, but it's read-only, so don't let them change anything. Oh, Bob does SQL maintenance, so he needs to be able to restart services, but only the SQL services. Why did I give Bob the ability to restart any service or kill any process? Because if he needs to be able to kill the SQL processes, but if he kills LSASS, that means the whole machine goes down. So you want to think about people and the responsibilities they have, and therefore the toolkit that they need in order to achieve those things. So think of this like an electrician's toolkit, a carpenter's toolkit, a plumber's toolkit. You put different tools in the toolkit so that they can do the job that they have for them. And then there's this notion of a JEA endpoint. A JEA endpoint is a connection point where the authorized users, so you still have to be authorized, you just don't have to be an admin. So Mary, who I took all her admin privileges away, is going to connect to this machine to the SQL maintenance endpoint. That SQL maintenance endpoint is going to determine whether Mary can come in or not. When they decide that she can come in, they're going to say, okay, now I'm going to run as someone with administrative privileges, and the only things I can do are these SQL maintenance tasks. Okay? So those are the two things. So you come to the endpoint, and the endpoint then provisions particular people with particular toolkits. So we'll say Mary came in, she gets access to the SQL maintenance toolkit. It's that simple.
And the one thing to note here is that as we've gone out and talked to customers, most of the work that goes on isn't in formally describing the toolkit. It is determining which users should have access to which commands. Mary needs access to the SQL maintenance toolkit. Well, what's in that toolkit, right? What does Mary actually need to be able to do? Because in the previous world where either you're a full admin or you're not, you just give them full admin and they can do whatever they need to do because they can do everything. So this restriction, this thought experiment about what do my operators actually need to be able to do is really where most of the effort comes in with JEA.
Yeah, no, it's important to note right here the notion that you might get it wrong, and if you get it wrong and somebody can't do their job, that's bad, okay? So a lot of people are really in. They love this story, and then that realization comes to them, and they're like, yeah, I can't do that. Like, if I get it wrong and they can't do their job, I'm on the hook, I'm screwed up, that's bad. Here's the way to think about that. You want to normalize that, right? So what we're going to have is the idea of a break the glass endpoint. A break the glass endpoint. So think about break the glass. What's really going on with break the glass? In the case of an emergency, you walk up to something, you break the glass, and you get the tool, a fire extinguisher, to go address the emergency. Now, often when you do these things, you pull a fire alarm or you break the glass, there's a well-defined event, right? There's evidence, broken glass. Often there's like dye that gets put on the person so they know who did it, and then they address the emergency. Now, if you're walking around with a fire extinguisher and dye all over your hand and there's not a fire, we're going to have a conversation like, why'd you do that? You know, and based upon the results of that conversation, something bad might happen. But if there was a fire, you know, see this and you say, oh, well, here's the fire and here's why I put it out. It's like, attaboy, that's awesome. You're great. Okay, so what we want to have is we want to normalize this. We'll have a break the glass endpoint where someone can connect and do anything. But when they do so, we're going to record who did it and what they did, and then it'll be available for review. And just like that. So you say, oh, okay, great. You needed to get your job done. The environment that I provisioned for you didn't allow you to get your job done, so you used the break the glass endpoint, and you did your job. Say, okay, let's look at that. Oh, that's very good. You know what? We should update our toolkit with that tool. You know, you did the right thing. We'll update our toolkit so that you don't have to do that again. Or, oh, okay, well, actually, you didn't need to do that. Let me train you on that. Or, hey, you did some malicious stuff. Let's walk to the door. All right. Okay, let's talk about how we author one of these toolkits.
So if we switch to 8, if you see on the screen right here, we have the JEA Toolkit Helper. Now, the JEA Toolkit Helper is a GUI that helps you build toolkits. It helps you add commands, add parameters in an appropriate way so that it's really easy. In the past, what we've shown is actually writing them by hand, and I will show that in a little bit. But I just want to start with a really easy experience that we recommend you do. So you can download the JEA Toolkit Helper from TechNet Script Center. It was written by a guy named Bruno. He's awesome. Is he out there? Yeah, I think so.
Did he open source it? Bruno, you here? Stand up, Bruno. Okay. Well,
never mind.
He's standing up in another room. Is this open source?
Not yet.
Okay.
Working on that.
Yeah, when he opens source, he'll change it from something useful like JEA Toolkit helper to something like Motheron or something. That's
Yeah.
how all open source names are.
So if you look at this GUI, you can see I can pick commands to add. I have access to a bunch of different commands. I can type get date, and let's say I want to add get date, but only with allowing the year parameter, the year, month, and day. You can't get date by hour. And so I can click the Add to Toolkit button, and it adds the get date commandlet with all of the different parameters to my toolkit. Really easy to add and use. So
that
this
makes no sense.
it makes no sense. Yeah, I know. It makes
Show like a get date, but limit that. Like, but you say like the SQL guy, you might say, okay, we can do a restart service, but you can only restart some services.
yeah, or
show 'em
we
that
can show.
Or
I think I already have restart service on here.
oh, you do. Yep.
One we can show
Stop
is-
service.
Actually, let's show this in the SMB share module. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add only the get commands
Oh, yeah.
from the
Oh, that's
SMB
nice.
share module. So in this example, we've got a module called SMB share, and we want to allow the administrator to run the get commands. So we want to allow him to get information about the shares, but we don't want to allow him to make a new one. So what I've done is any command that begins with GET is exposed.
So here, I'll show one. Imagine you have remove SMB share, right? So this could remove a share. But what you can do here, the real point was, you could say things like name, and then, where'd it go? Did I do that wrong? Okay, remove. And then what you can do is you can come down here and you can say, here are the names. These are the only names that you can remove. And you can specify the exact names, set of names, or you can specify a regular expression to say, hey, they can only remove things that start with a B. Okay?
Yeah, so this is the JEA Toolkit helper. It's a GUI that helps you author toolkits. Another way, actually the way Jeffrey initially conceived of authoring toolkits was using .csv files. So I have up here is I have a CSV file. You see the top row. Actually, let me magnify this guy. Top row says module, name, parameter, validate pattern, and it's got all of the names of my commands that I'm exposing. So if I wanted to, I could add the SMB share module, and the name would be get-star. So this is another more user-friendly way to edit toolkits. Now the final way to edit toolkits that we're going to show is actually writing them by hand. And the way this looks is we have in the JEA module, which you can download, we have a set of examples. So this here is an example that comes with JEA. And you can take this toolkit little section and edit it by hand. And so you could add your own command. So what's one? What did we say?
Get-SMB star.
Yeah, get-SMB star, for example. So those are the three ways we talk about authoring a toolkit and editing a toolkit.
Great. So actually, while we're here, this is probably what we're going to show. So this shows how ultimately the mechanics of a JEA toolkit, right? So ultimately, the way you're successful with a JEA toolkit, you want to switch to the slides? Okay, I'm going to go back though. Okay, so the way you do this is you use desired state configuration. So that's all great. Now, how do I get that to all my systems, right? And the answer is desired state configuration. How many people are familiar with desired state configuration? Okay, not everybody. A lot, but not everybody. So desired state configuration, PowerShell desired state configuration, is a set of language extensions to be able to express the desired state of a system. And then you run the script. It produces a desired state configuration document that then gets sent to a machine, and then it makes it so. Okay, and by the way, yesterday we announced that desired state configuration works against Linux as well. Okay, now JEA doesn't work against Linux, but desired state configuration does. Anyway, so what you'll be able to do is express these documents, send it to the machines, and it's a very simple way to configure things. So here what we're showing is configuration file servers, and then we'll say node $. See here, no dollar sign. So that says I've got for each one of the nodes, I want a JEA toolkit called storage tools. I give it a name, and then I've got these command specs. Okay, now the command specs basically says for the module, I want to give all the commands in the storage module and all the commands in the SMB share module. So remember, we had two concepts. Concept one is easy, right? Two concepts. Get two hands, two concepts. One, toolkits. Two, endpoints. One, the toolkit, what things you want people to be able to do. Two, the endpoint that you want them to connect to. So we call this the storage endpoint, EP for endpoint. We give it a name. And then here you give toolkits. You can have a set of toolkits, right? You have the storage tools, maybe some utility tools, maybe some general purpose tools. You can have multiple toolkits per endpoint. And then, of course, you have to have the CIDL, the access control list. Okay? All right, so here's how desired state configuration works. We start off with these, the why we design desired state configuration versus general scripting. So in general scripting, you got a ton of things that you have to deal with, right? What is your intention? But then how do you deal with the dependencies? What about error handling? How am I going to do logging? What happens if this fails and then I have to restart? Do I have to clean up first? All that stuff. What happens if I have to do a reboot? What happens if I'm calling somebody and they have to do a reboot? Like, did I know about that? Is in the middle of my script, I call somebody who then does a reboot? Like, how do I recover from that? It turns out that, in particular for configuration management, these issues start to accumulate and it becomes pretty complex. And so what we're doing is we're moving to the world of desired state configuration. By the way, for operations, it's less so, but for configuration, these things really become a problem over time. So what we're doing with desired state configuration is we're moving to a model where you have the DSC configuration. This is an expression of your intent, the way the world I want it to be. So think about Star Trek. Remember Star Trek, right? That great Jean-Luc Picard. He'd sit there and he'd say, here's the way it should be, make it so. And he'd just turn it to somebody else and they had to make it so. And then he'd go off. Number one or number two was somebody, was it Riker? Number two. Anyway, Riker would go off and he'd make it so, and the captain didn't have to go off and think about that, right? He went and made himself some Earl Grey tea, talked to Counselor Troy, and all the right things were happening. And if something didn't happen, then he'd come back and he'd say, oh, Captain, here was the issue, and he'd say, okay, now we address it. Well, it's exactly the same model. You express your intention, and then at the bottom, we have these desired state configuration resources. These are mostly PowerShell scripts, but they're PowerShell scripts written to a certain style guide. You have to be idempotent. If you need to do a reboot, you don't do the reboot. You tell the system a reboot has to happen so I can consolidate reboots. Here's the way you do logging. Here's the way you do error handling. So it's really just a set of conventions on scripting that allow composition. It's really that simple. And then in the middle, we have this desired state configuration engine that puts these two together. So it's the stuff that deals with error handling and dependency, reboot resilience, automation. And so the idea is, I say, here's the way I want the world to be. It'll go and make it so. And if it turns out that there's an error or a reboot has to happen, you'll address that. And then it'll pick up and go on from where you were without hassle, right? It's what's called a convergence system.
Yeah. One thing to note on this slide, just as it relates to JEA, we talked about how JEA was built on existing security technologies. DSC really enables JEA to be simple because we're enabling you to just declare your intent. I want these users to have access to these commands without having to worry about what the JEA DSC resources are doing, which is saying, okay, I'm going to set up this constraint endpoint and this JEA admin account and rotate the password every 24 hours and make sure it's random and X, Y, and Z, right? So all of that stuff is abstracted away from you in a secure way, and the configuration is your real simple interface.
Yeah, exactly. Makes it much simpler. Okay, so let's talk about desired state configuration in action, how this really works. So we start off, we have these four phases, right? Author, compile, deploy, make it so. So you start off here with, you got PowerShell. How do you author one of these documents? And the answer is any way you want. You can use Notepad if you want, right? Because at the end of the day, the document is just an ASCII text document. It's a standards-based document called a MOF, a Managed Object Format, and you can produce this any way you want. So you can do VI, Notepad, or PowerShell version 5, PowerShell version 4, PowerShell version 5 can produce these, or any of the configuration management tools, right? We're promulgating DSC as a configuration management platform so that multiple tools can layer on top of it. And as of today, the partners we have are Chef, Didi, and Guardrail. And they're great partners, and they layer on top of desired state configuration. And what that means is you can purchase those products and be assured that they can manage everything in the Windows ecosystem. If configuration management products not layered on desired state configuration, note to self, warning, warning. Warning, Will Robinson, warning. Not aligned with server strategy. Run, run, run. Anyway, so you can produce this any way you want. PowerShell's one way, or third-party tools are just as fine. Ultimately, you then compile to this configuration document. That's the standards-based document called a MOF. It then gets deployed. Now, how do you deploy it? And the answer is two ways. One is a push mode. Use standards-based management, WSMan, to push it to a machine that then makes it so. Or two, a pull mode. In a pull mode, you've configured the endpoint to talk to a DSC pull server. This is a web service that implements a REST API. Again, anybody can implement that. And it will then pull down the document, says, here's who I am, what should my configuration be? It then configures that and then reports status. Oh, and we get the configuration doc. Oh, so then this configuration document gets to the Make It So engine, hands it to goes to the machine, hands it to the engine. The engine then calls all the resources to make it so. And then those things then configure the endpoints, configure the toolboxes, and keeps them up to date. It will also detect configuration drift. So if you've configured something, and then one of your helpful admins comes in and says, I don't understand that, let me just delete that, it will detect that and auto-recreate it for you. So let's show you how that works.
Yeah. So switch back to 8. So what I have on my screen right here, actually, let me go back. You guys remember this JEA Toolkit helper tool that we were using before and we added various commands to? Well, what I've done is I've clicked the Script Output tab, and in the Script Output tab, it actually generates my configuration for me. So what I've done is I've Controlled A, Control C. I've specified that we're going to target this JEA Demo 1 machine. And it gives...
I think you need to make it bigger, the font bigger. Just Control plus a couple times.
Yeah.
There you go.
You can see, based on this configuration that was generated, it says the SDDL is just for Contoso John Slack. So you don't have to know how to read. I don't even know if anybody knows how to read that.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I know what my SID is.
In fact, I think
Do you guys know what your SID is?
I think that 00 should be an 03.
Yeah,
just go with
sorry,
it.
I was. Anyway, so it's a little bit friendlier to use. So I've generated this configuration. I've copied and pasted it out. I can run the configuration, and I'm going to use push mode to apply this configuration to another machine. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that, run this script. And it's going to give me an error, which is exciting.
Did you do the initiate demo? First do a clear screen so we can...
Yeah, so we don't want to see all the errors.
Yeah.
All right, so ignite demo.
There we go.
Generates the document.
So when you ran that function, it created the MOF.
Yes, and I forgot to change. I need to target the machine that we're targeting and not my local machine.
Perfect.
Which is an important step in the DSC process. You need to make sure that you're actually applying to an appropriate machine. So here's what you're seeing on the screen right now. I ran start DSC configuration -verbose -wait, and so as this configuration is running, I am receiving the output from it. So if you look at what's coming out on the screen, it's saying start resource, JEA Toolkit Ignite demo, start test, it's testing if it was done. It didn't see the endpoint that it expected, so it started to set that endpoint. And then test, start set, inset, and it gives me a little bit of a warning because I'm enabling run as because we are running as an administrator account. So just to show that this deployment worked, what I'm going to go ahead and do is in the example code up here, you can actually see that it tells me how to create a new PowerShell session. So PowerShell session, computer name, change that again. JEA demo 1.
Oh wait, can I show you something? Anybody come into my PowerShell Unplugged session? Okay, people who didn't raise your hand, you're screwing up. Come to my PowerShell Unplugged session tonight with Don Jones, superstar Don Jones and I are going to do this. Anyway, so one of the things I'm going to show, so it's a spoiler, I was going to show this cool technique that I learned at the PowerShell Summit. I saw some guy doing something. We just had that 3 weeks ago. Saw some guy doing something. I was like, wait, what did you do there? And so what he did was this. So notice that all these commands are commented out. And what he did was he went and said Shift Alt, and then down, 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 then left, right arrow, and it selects them all. And then if you say space, it takes them all away. Isn't that cool? So again, now here I am. I'm going to go back. I'm going to say Shift Alt. I'm going to say up, 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 up. Right. What did I do wrong? Down, 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 down. Shift Tab. This is a test. Is that crazy or what? Is there anything better in the world than PowerShell? I think not. I think not. Sorry, I just had to show them.
No.
Anyway, come to my PowerShell Unplugged. You're going to have a gazillion things like that.
I should come to that.
You should.
All right. So I've created my new session. I'm going to enter PS session against that session, or enter PS session. I'm now in this remote. I'm connected to the endpoint, and I should have access to all of the commands that we enumerated earlier.
Yeah, and just to be clear, so in this context, he came in, he wasn't an admin, and he's connected, and now it connected him and logged him in as an admin.
Yeah, so if we look at the list of commands, we can see get counter, get process, get service, and then you see this whole set of get SMB, get SMB, get SMB commands, which we enumerated earlier.
Yeah, notice the source. The source is the Ignite Demo Toolkit. It's no longer the SMB Toolkit. Now, why is that? Or the SMB Share Toolkit. Why is that? Because if you recall, one of the things we did was we limited the number of parameters that you could do, right? Like reset service, you could only do certain services, right? Well, the real reset service allows you to reset any service. So what we did was we created a proxy function that could only do things that you said they could do. So it's in its own module.
Yeah, and if you want to learn more about that, I highly recommend you view the TechEd presentation for JEA, where Jeffrey really goes into the nuts and bolts of what's going on under the hood here.
Yeah, that's fun.
All right, so that was deploying JEA using push mode. And as Jeffrey mentioned, you can also use pull mode, but it's a little bit more of an involved demo, so we're just going to
switch back.
Hop on back.
All right. So I mentioned to you that we had two simple concepts, two hands, right? The toolkit, what someone can do, and the endpoint, how they connect, make sure that they're an authorized user, and if they are, we log them in an account with admin privileges and give them access to one or more of these toolkits you defined. Yeah? All clear? I lied to you. In fact, there's three concepts. And the third is this PowerShell modules, right? So these PowerShell modules really are the things that make it so. As I mentioned to you, if there was just the remove, if I gave you access to remove SMB share, you could remove any SMB share. We crafted an environment that said, no, you can't remove any SMB share. You can only remove those that have this file name. And in order to do that, we dynamically generate one of these PowerShell modules that has a similar signature, but it enforces the constraints that you set up. And then when you invoke it, it will call the underlying commandlet. So that's what this PowerShell module is.
So when we've gone on customer visits, one slide.
Sorry.
As we've gone on customer visits, what we've seen is that the built-in commandlets, while they give you flexibility, a lot of times people want to expose their own custom commands, right? So if we think Toolkit and Endpoint, that lets you define which built-in commands you want to expose to your users, but it doesn't let you define your own custom commands. It doesn't let you take all of those scripts that you already have for your environment and put them into JEA, right? So building your own PowerShell modules with your own custom commands is what lets you do this. So in order to do that, you have to understand what PowerShell modules are, how to add your own commands to those modules. And
what John is gracefully saying is ignore everything I said. I made the wrong point. He was making the right point for this slide. That was very good.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. It's helpful that I wrote the slide.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so switching over, now we see the purple prompt, which means this is my module demo.
It's royal.
And so in the past, when you were writing PowerShell modules, you had to keep a lot of things in your head. You had to know, all right, so what's my PS module path? And all right, so I make a folder in my PS module path, but I got to make sure it's at the right level in my PS module path. And I got to name it the same thing as this PSD1 file that I have, and that has to be the same name as my PSM1 file, and I make that my root module, and it's, oh my God, it's so complex. It's comical how hard it is for PowerShell team members to understand. But on the right here, we've simplified the process. What you see here is the module browser add-on. Now, the way I got this add-on onto my system is I clicked add-ons in ISE, and it said, get module browser add-on tool. It takes me to a website, I install it. By default, it gets loaded. Really simple to do. You guys can do it now with WMF5. Now, in the My Collection tab of Module Browser, I click New Module. I say where I want it to go, select it, I give it a name. So we're going to say, Hello Ignite is the name of this module. I'm going to describe it. This is a demo, exclamation point. And I can give it tags if I want to make it easier to find or something. So this one's going to be tagged Jeffrey. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to create the module. I push create. It creates a PSD1 file. And in this PSD1, it's got a root module of helloignite.psm1. It's got a version. It's got a GUID. It's got my author name. It's got my description in it. This is a demo. And in helloignite PSM1, I can now add my own functions. They're both opened. I didn't have to really think about it. So if I do Control-J, I can add in my own advanced function, or I can do Control-J and just type in really simple function. So my function param1, param2, and if I want, I can add, I don't know, I can type. This one will just do write host hello ignite.
Ooh, right host.
I know.
A puppy has just died
Oh,
somewhere.
whoa.
That's,
You know about
cool.
the information stream?
I
That
do.
new feature?
Oh, you
Right
gotta
host
come-
is no longer the devil. It is only the devil's puppy.
It's true. Come to my Unplugged. We're going to talk about changes where now, I mean, because we are humanitarian, we do not like puppies to die. And so we modified it so that every time you write host, a puppy no longer dies. And I'm going to give you all the details in our Unplugged session.
Yeah, so just... So I've written my hello ignite PSM1. It's got my function. So I'm going to say don't
Kill a puppy.
kill a puppy is my command.
We're adding, we've expanded our authorized verbs. Sign of the times.
Yeah, by new blood or lack thereof. So don't kill a puppy. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add this to the toolkit we had earlier. So,
Oh, really? Oh, this is fun.
yeah, so this is, yeah, see? So I'm going to add don't kill a puppy to my toolkit. I'm going to go ahead and delete that, save it. Oh, it wasn't even saved in the first place. Now, adding it to the toolkit is useful, but on the target machine that I'm using, the, what did I call it? The Ignite demo module doesn't exist. So I actually have to do two things. One, I have to copy the module onto the system that's getting managed. And then two, I have to add it to the toolkit. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and simplify a little bit.
This is more interesting than I thought. So Bev, you get that in focus. So this is great. You produce this toolkit that you then want to share with everybody, but how do you get it on the systems? Well, desired state configuration is going to do this software deployment task for you. That's rocking.
Yeah, so what I've done is I've set up a SMB share on this local machine. It is, what we're going to do is we're going to go to, this is the my share. I had a dry run earlier, which I didn't delete. And we're also going to go to my PS module path, and we're going to copy my module onto the share. So as I'm doing that, we're going to say, hello, Ignite. That was my module. I'm going to go ahead and copy it into my share. Hello, Ignite is now in my share. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, copying hello Ignite, is that hello underscore Ignite? And I'm going to copy it, so that was my source path. I'm copying it from the share. And on the target machine, I'm going to copy it into program files, and I'm going to copy it into the appropriate place on my PS module path. Recurse true, type directory, and if the module ever gets modified on the share, the modified date is more recent, it will actually go ahead and overwrite it with the newer version. So this is the file resource that we've added. We're going to save. No, we're not going to save it. We're just going to run it. Oh, I am currently in JEA, and as it turns out, when you're using JEA, you can't create a configuration and run it.
Yes.
We're in very constrained mode.
That's success.
That would actually be a bad thing if within JEA. I'm going to go ahead and run it. It's going to go ahead and run. And then it's going to, oh, look, it told me unapproved verbs. You lied. Don't kill is not approved. And now I'm in a remote session. I can run git command, don't kill star. You see we have don't kill a puppy. And I can run don't kill a puppy, hello Ignite.
Whoa. That's rocking. That's very good.
And that's the end of that demo.
That was awesome.
All right. This one is you.
All right, so let's talk about, we mentioned, now we've been able to say, you don't have to have admin privileges to do admin tasks. We've been able to say, okay, and now we can constrain what you do. And so these guys are asking, yeah, but what if they still do something bad? I want to be able to track everything. So now we have auditing with JEA. So we're able to identify suspicious activity. We've enhanced the PowerShell logs. So one of the things that the bad guys do is they're able to use PowerShell to be able to run programs in memory without them ever touching the disk. This is something called script block execution. And the bad guys, I don't know if you've seen this, but there is a significant rise in the use of PowerShell by the malware guys. Now, there's really two reasons for this. First is they have exquisite taste in technology. They really are just a very refined group of people with fine taste. And the second is, for the very same reasons that you love PowerShell, it's very efficient. You do a small amount of typing and get a large amount of work. It's exactly the same thing. So think of it this way. Chainsaw applied to tree, good. Chainsaw applied to leg, bad. It's the same thing. PowerShell can be used for good or for evil. Now, the evil guys like one aspect of it where it gives them operational security. We're closing that hole in PowerShell version 5 with something called script block logging. So all the stuff that they were able to do now gets fully surfaced in the logs.
do we want to just demo that right now?
Do you want?
Yeah, let's switch
Sure.
back.
Although we gotta zoom.
yeah,
I want
here.
to make sure Marcus has time.
So
Oh yeah.
what you see,
This is a common technique that people will do. What they're able to do, this is why the bad guys love PowerShell. You can say invoke expression, and then you say invoke web request, and you pull down, you know, the little URL, you pull down code from a URL, and you can run it in memory. It's crazy powerful.
Yeah,
Okay?
and it's especially, it's especially worrisome because if you look at the PowerShell logs previously, you would say, hey, they got some script from this website and then they ran it, but I don't know what was in it.
Could have been a
what
good
did they
thing.
do? You
Yep.
know? So,
But again, useful technique for good or for evil.
so I am now going to run this script.
Using the amazing carriage turn. So we are going to leave it to you to decide whether that was a use of PowerShell for good or for evil. It's one of my favorite things in the world, honestly. I just get immense joy every time I see that thing.
If you
I
can't
really
read
do.
it, it says happy scripting from PowerShell and Rick Askey. And yeah, if you come up, I'll give you the URL. And actually, we're running out of time, but if you go in the logs, you can actually see the script that was invoked in order to show Rick Astley on the screen. All right, so popping back.
Yeah, and so we've also added transcripting. Transcripting is an over-the-shoulder view of what happens. It says everything that you type in, everything that gets typed out in response is then logged. Now, transcripting is universal. It happens with any host. In the past, it was only available on consoles, and you can set it up for a a system-wide transcripting through group policy. So what you can say is that every single PowerShell session gets transcripted, send it to a file or to a particular directory, and so you're able to see everything that anyone's done on that system. And the benefit is the event logs are great for sort of big data and analytics, and you can find some suspicious activity. But then when you want to see, well, what did the person actually do? It's pretty hard to stitch together event logs. If you've ever tried it, it's difficult. You know, where are they? Then they did what? The transcript allows you to see exactly what they did. So you sort of use event logs to find the suspicious activity, and then the transcripts to do detailed forensics.
Right. And just briefly showing transcripting, I have set up transcripting on this machine. You can look at all of the transcripts that we have. And I've opened one up from earlier in the demo, and you can see that at command start time, we ran get command, and this is the output that we saw. So that is...
Yeah, no, he's running a previous version, an earlier version of
Yep.
the WMF. Each one of the transcripts will start with a set of metadata that shows who came in, what time, what computer they logged in from. If they run as someone, we show both that and who they connected as. So a bunch of metadata.
Yep. And this is actually the one where I tried to run the configuration from within JEA, and we will be able to see this syntax is not supported in this run space. So the error that we saw earlier shows up, and you really get a full idea of what was occurring in that remote session.
And you'll also notice, so again, this is the over-the-shoulder view, so it shows you what it was that he typed and then what the response was. The only variation here is that it was configured to be able to include the invocation time, so that's added at the beginning, so it helps better correlate what you're seeing in the event log with what was actually going on in the system. Okay, so you use that date time to look things in the event log.
All right. So finally, with our little bit of time left, Mark Wall, if you'd like to come on, or actually, just a little bit. So JEA is all
Come on up,
about
Mark.
capability,
Log in.
limiting the capability of administrators. You're not an operator, or your operators aren't admins, but they run as an administrator, but only for certain tasks. Privileged access management JIT capabilities are all about time limiting administrator actions. So it's all about saying you're not an admin, but you can get elevated to the administrator group for the next 2 hours to get done whatever you want to do.
Now, Mark, have you already given your session, or is that coming up?
Not yet, today.
Today. Okay, so let me just say, what these guys have done is some amazingly clever architecture. Are you going to go into the architecture? Yeah, so attend Mark's session later on, unless it conflicts with one of mine. But if it doesn't conflict with mine, go to one of his, and it's very clever architecture where he's able to bring this incredible capability he's going to show you here with very little operational impact. I mean, it's very easy to adopt and deploy. It's just really clever thinking. Sorry, Mark, go. Please.
So PAM, JIT, and JEA are actually better together.
Oh,
and we're going to hop back for just a second.
Sorry.
And if we're going to just zoom over this really quickly, but Jin, the admin on this slide, is requesting elevation to get into a role. Based on however you've got PAM-JIT set up, you can maybe require she has multi-factor authentication, maybe her boss needs to approve it. She gets elevated to that role, and that role will give her permissions to access a JEA endpoint. So these two things together allows you to say, you're not an admin, but if I say so, you can get elevated to a group that can run restart service, but only for the next 2 hours. So it's really, really constraining what your operators can do. And that takes us to the demo. And we are VGA1.
Oh, sorry, yes. There we go.
All right. So I guess the first thing, Mark doesn't have a mic, so I will narrate on his behalf. So the first thing I think that Mark is going to try and do is he's going to try and remotely manage a server using JEA. So he's going to try to enter a session against this corp server with the configuration name. When configuration name is the name of the JEA endpoint, demo1ep. And he fails. He doesn't have access to that endpoint.
Come back, come back.
That's the end of the demo. But wait, Mark has PAM-JIT set up, so he's going to try and elevate into the group that does have access to that endpoint. So right now, he's running git help on new PAM request. So he can see that there's actually PowerShell commands for requesting access. There's also a web GUI that he can request. So he's requesting to get elevated. He gives his justification. He tells how long he'd like to be added. Mark's. So now his request was submitted successfully, and if he restarts, you can see that he is elevated, and we can either extend or relinquish membership to that group. So now he's opened up a new PowerShell window. You can see what groups he's part of. He is now going to run a script that will connect him to the JEA endpoint and run some commands and show the output, I believe. So the script is running, it's thinking.
And so just to be clear, now he's been elevated to these privileges for a particular period of time.
Yep. So now you can see that he has access. He ran git command. He's got access to some limited subset of commands. And if he runs who am I, you can see that he is the connected user is priv.gen, and the run as user is the JEA demo1 endpoint. And he's now going to pick a service to restart that won't break everything. And it worked. So he's got a validate set, is what he's showing, where restart service only works against W3 SVC. It doesn't work against any other argument. It's not that WMI AP SRV is not a service, it's that he doesn't have access to restart it with JEA. So before, he couldn't even access the server, and now he can access the server, but only in a very limited fashion by combining PAM, JIT, and JEA.
And then again, he was given elevated privileges for a period of time. When that time period ends, he gets kicked out.
All right. Thank you, Mark.
Again, crazy good stuff and surprisingly straightforward to deploy.
Yep. It doesn't require modifying your existing Active Directory infrastructure at all. It's awesome. All right, so restrictions. Here's some things just to be aware of when we talk about JEA. One, JEA occurs entirely through PowerShell remoting. So if you're currently using remote desktop and GUI tools, you might have to do some translating in order to figure out how to get your workflows done through PowerShell. Two, JEA is running in no language mode, which Jeffrey talked about earlier. You run 2+2, that fails. The reason for this is we're only exposing a very limited subset of the PowerShell language to the user for security purposes. Three, JEA is running as a local administrator. The restriction here is that it's only a local administrator on the current box. So if you think about managing a domain controller where there's no real notion of local administrator, JEA can sometimes run into hiccups. And then four, it depends on Windows Management Framework.
Let me just take the word sometimes out of that. That currently does not work.
No, it does not work.
Well.
Yeah, don't try it at home.
Not sometimes. It does not work.
And then four, it depends on Windows Management Framework 5 and PowerShell version 5, which we are happy to announce is now available down level to 2008 R2 and Windows 7 in
Windows
preview.
7.
Now, what we've been showing you today is what we call XJEA. It's available on the PowerShell Gallery or TechNet Script Center. It is experimental, and it is built on top of existing PowerShell security technologies. In the future, we will have JEA. We're going to drop the X. It's not going to be experimental. It'll be in the box for Windows Server vNext. It's going to be stable, and it's going to be built into those PowerShell security technologies instead of on top of. We're going to keep on emphasizing making it simple, but it's going to be in the box. And the syntax may change from XJEA, but as we noted earlier, most of your work is going to be determining what commands to expose to which users, and that work is valuable no matter what. Even if you don't adopt JEA, it's good to understand that.
Great. So the big lesson I want you to walk away with is that admins are part of the attack surface. So a lot of us have been trained to think about our attack surface as the physical boundaries of our data center, the firewall, the network boundaries, etc. But now you have to think about the human boundaries of your system, because now the admins are demonstrably the attack surface. It is the primary attack surface these days that the bad guys are using. And once they get that person, then they get the keys to the kingdom, okay? So our goals for JEA were to address this. It's specifically to address that issue, JEA and JET. So we want to reduce the number of full-time admins. You go talk to corporations, you'll find an amazing number of people with admin privileges. And you say, well, why do they have those privileges? And the answer is, well, because sometimes they need to reboot the server. Like, let's get rid of all that, okay? Next is we want to be able to limit the movement of full admins. So in this environment, if a machine, or when a machine gets cracked, when they harvest the credentials, everything that's being done is with local credentials. So it took local credentials to be able to, local admin privileges to crack and get the credentials. Once you have them, you get the other credentials, they're all local admin credentials. So you get nothing. So we've limited the value of cracking one of your servers because we've eliminated people using their domain credentials to do operations on your local server. Next, we provided granular control over administrative actions. They can restart services, but they don't necessarily restart every service, just the ones they want, and then we log everything. So again, two simple concepts. There's three, but you don't have to understand that one. There's the JEA Toolkit, defines what things people can do, and the JEA Endpoint that specifies what non-admin users can access which toolkits. We deploy this all through desired state configuration to dramatically simplify setting things up, keeping them in place, and you can use PowerShell modules to create your own custom abstractions and make them available to users. So Michael Hayden did a keynote at the Black Hat conference in 2010, and at that somebody asked him, hey, that was when we became really aware of lots of attacks coming from foreign nation states. And they asked him, what are we supposed to do about all this? And his answer was, man up and defend yourselves. Now, the real point here is there is no backstop. There's nobody who has your back. You've got to do it yourself. The government isn't going to set up firewalls at the sea, at the nation's borders. You really have to defend that. Now, we play a role in giving you the tools so that you can defend yourselves. But it really is time. If you're not up on current events, it really is time for all of us to significantly up our security game. We really need to do that. And we hope to give you the tools that you can do that. You need to take advantage of those tools and do that. Now, as you do that, if you find problems, please let us know. We are passionate about this. I mean, really, we are just passionate about helping you secure your systems. So if you have problems, please let us know. So here's, we're looking for partners. Tell us about any blockers. And
Yep.
John is the man.
Yep, let me know. And I'm going to leave my email up at the end. But any questions or comments, we're just about out of time.
No, we got 43 seconds.
I think
We can take 7 questions. No answers.
I was wondering the limitation was the no language mode. Is that going to set any limitations on the modules that you use?
that's a great point. So when you write your own module, it is actually running in full language mode.
Yes,
The
so-
user is exposed to no language mode, but your scripts and commands are running in full language mode.
Yeah. Okay, I guess that's... Goodbye. Thank you.